Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Women d'un certain âge, i.e. my own age, are up in arms at a very specific injustice which has been visited upon them by the British government.
When the pensionable age for women was raised in the name of austerity for some from 60 to 66, it left hundreds of thousands of women who'd scheduled or even taken their retirement on the old rules with neither work nor pension.
Hell hath no fury, of course, like a woman scorned, and the result has been some of the most effective, creative and unremitting campaigns in recent history. The WASPIs, Women Against State Pension Inequality, and their allies have made life a scorching hell for our rulers, of a kind not seen since the Suffragettes. Joining us now are two such Suffragettes, fresh from banging the door of 10 Downing Street, campaigner, speaker and partner of Britain's most eminent QC, Michael Mansfield, Ms. Yvette Greenway, and the campaign director, Joanne Welch, both from the Back to 60 campaign. Yvette, welcome to the Sputnik.
Hello.
Just for viewers who don't know this campaign, I was in Parliament when it began, so I'm well familiar with it. Just set out what happened and why you think it's wrong.
Okay. Well, in simple terms, the government meant to notify women if there were going to be any changes to their state pension age. And basically, that was a promise that wasn't kept. Many women didn't get any notification at all, and some women were only notified a year to months before they approached their 60th birthday and they thought they were going to get their state pension. So obviously, it's devastating, the impact, because women are left sitting there thinking, what the hell's going here? I've planned for all of my life, all of my working life for this day, only to be told it's all being pulled away from underneath me. So it's a huge
Devastating
issue.
indeed, not just the feeling of being cheated, but as you say, people had made their plans on the basis that they were going to have a state pension, which was then taken away from them. Joanne, what's the difference between your Back to 60 campaign and the WASPI campaign, which is equally vociferous, of course, but there is an important difference in your demands, isn't there?
There is a difference, although we share a common goal as well. The difference is WASPI are asking for transitional arrangements, which is effectively a bridging pension and compensation. We're saying, thank you very much, that they're our own dues and we would like them returned to us. And we think that's a reasonable ask. We've experienced lifelong inequities as 50s women, and why should we now take this slap in the face, just when we were about to relax and have our retirements?
How many women are involved in this?
2.48 million.
See, that's a lot of votes.
Yeah, it is a lot of votes. And
they've got adult children, they've got
adult
husbands,
children.
many of them. If you add up the number of votes involved, you could win a general election
Families.
just on their votes.
100%. And women are becoming far more militant as this issue is unresolved. And they talk about elections, when's the next election, they watch the elections, whereas prior to being involved in this way, they were probably not politically active.
It is funny, Yvette, isn't it? The Conservatives were always the party for old people. Older people supported them disproportionately, even at the last election. And yet, it's them, the Tories, who are taking things away from older people and threatening to take much more, of course, with the dementia tax and all of that. This is a big change, isn't it, in the political culture?
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, from my point of view, George, I'm a real political cynic anyway. I think that no matter who is in power, I think they all have their faults and they are all guilty of backtracking on promises and, you know, not delivering what they say that they're going to deliver. So, to be honest, to me, it's neither... It really doesn't matter who's doing what in terms of political parties. You know, the fact is it's being done. It's affecting normal, everyday women. It shouldn't be, and it needs to be stopped. Any governments that's in charge can seemingly do what they want, you know, and people such as normal everyday women, men, whatever, are left to come out, you know, screaming, shouting, and really having to fight for what is rightfully theirs, you know.
But why was it with health then? What is it about? Is it an austerity measure or is it about gender equality?
They're talking about longevity and equality, but it isn't about longevity. It's a false premise about longevity and equality. I mean, how can you possibly say to a group of women who've suffered lifelong inequities, OK, now you're going to be equal to men, you know, no disrespect to men, but they haven't experienced what 50s women have experienced in their lives. Gender pay gap, pension gap, you know, we could go on. Yeah. And, you know, we thought that a pension at 60 was some kind of
compensation for that.
Yeah, and we have a legitimate expectation, as Yvette has said, for a pension at 60. You know, we were...
It's really a contract, wasn't it? It was a social contract.
It's woven into the fabric of society. It's absolutely a contract. How can you be contracted out of a pension unless you're contracted in? They talk about being contracted out and SERPs. So if you can contract out with SERPs, you're obviously contracted in. I mean, it just... the way it's been presented by the government is, you know, oh, what's the problem? It's only 18 months. No, it isn't 18 months. It's up to 6 years, as Yvette knows well, which she and I discuss it all the time. It's up to 6 years for some women. And truly, Silence of Suicide have put out a survey and well, the effects of the survey, the results of the survey are just
this is how I first got involved with this campaign. It was in relation to the mental health aspect, the impacts on people's mental health. And it's shocking because 99%, we've had over 20,000 responses to this survey so far, and they're still coming in. But 99% say their physical and mental well-being have been severely affected by this government policy. You know, that is huge.
Did you get a welcome mat at 10 Downing Street
well, they opened the door, George. That's
and how many signatures did you deliver?
So just under 656,000, just under 600, and that's huge. But what we want, you know, whichever side of the fence you're on, whether you're WASPI or one of the many other causes, you know, because there are lots of women out there campaigning, you know, and they may have slightly different viewpoints, but the message is the same. Ultimately, you know, you've robbed us. So ideally, you know, the 3.3 million women that are affected, we'd like every single one of them to sign, you know, and so we can go back and present more.
We talk about being one voice because, as Michael Mansfield QC has said, to hold the direction, you need to be one voice. So we've said to all the peer groups, we respect everybody's viewpoint. Why be an echo? Be a voice. We respect your opinions. However, our common goal is to win back our earned dues. So if we speak with one voice, we've got more chance of securing back those earned dues. So we've said to WASPI, we paid in, you paid out, who are fully on board with one voice, and several other peer groups are on board. Come and join us, you know. Do you want your pensions returned? Yes? OK, what's not to like?
Yeah, that's the demand. I can tell you as a former practising politician that in the words of Dr. Johnson, the knowledge that one is to be hanged in the morning concentrates the mind wonderfully. And MPs, metaphorically, could be hanged every 4 or 5 years. So that number of people, plus their adult children, plus their partners, that's a lot of folks. That's way, way beyond the difference between winning or losing a general election. If you can get all these people together, you can
But we do say to them, you know, use your vote wisely in elections. Engage with your local representatives, find out what their views are, what are they doing to support the campaign.
Absolutely.
If nothing, then use your vote wisely.
Yeah. Now, on a different matter, I believe you're also involved in a campaign called Sling the Mesh.
Yeah.
Can you
Sling the mesh.
Sling the Mesh, that's right. Tell us
Sling the
more.
mesh.
I thought I
Sling the
knew all
mesh.
the campaigns.
Well, this is something, again, it's an equality issue, it's a social issue, it's something that has had a damning impact on the psychological and physical well-being of women. And it's a campaign. I sort of follow the campaign, I support the campaign wholeheartedly. And basically, a lot of women have been implanted with a mesh called TVT, which was used to treat incontinence and or prolapse. And of course, these wonderful promises were made, like, this is the answer to all your problems, you know, you'll never suffer again, you know, this is the thing for you, you need to have it done, you know, 10-minute operation, all sorted. Except it's not all sorted. Because there were no long-term clinical trials. And again, this is just from what I've read. There'll be many people that are much more knowledgeable than myself in, you know, the ins and outs. However, there was no long-term study done. So people, sort of 5-6 years down the line, are now coming forward with some horrendous problems. People are having their organs sliced through by this mesh, sliced through their bladders, urethras.
It's serious.
It is
It's
life-threatening.
actually been banned some places.
Yes, it has. It's been banned in New Zealand, Australia, and I know the campaign over here is to get it banned completely, because it should be. There are alternatives.
Because it's still being applied.
It's still being applied. It's still being applied, even though around the globe, you know, this is a huge issue. People are fully aware of the dangers. There was a programme on television earlier this week on BBC One, and one surgeon actually said, we all jumped on the bandwagon. Yeah. That's how they view women and women's health. We jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Well, what for? I can only assume that there's some financial benefit to be had, you know, and time saving. But it's, I mean, this is a topic all on its own. To be quite honest, it needs to be discussed.
But it's an example, if I may say so, of the value and power of activism. If you hadn't told us you were involved in this campaign, we wouldn't be discussing it. Now we are, to a very large audience. And when you said the mesh, I didn't know what you were talking about. But as soon as you explained it, I know about this problem.
Yeah,
so I must say, as suffragettes, you've got plenty of feathers in your caps.
The next time we go to number 10, we'll be knocking on the door with a piece of mesh in our hands.
Yeah, quite right. Quite right. Well, it's the only way to change things. More power to your formidable elbows. Thank you very much indeed
Thank you
for
very
coming
much. Thank
on
you
board
both.
the Sputnik.
Coming up next, we'll be talking about Britain's favourite dish, and it's not fish and chips. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Sputnik. In my lifetime, we have gone from virtually no Indian restaurants in Britain to Indian menus which offered scampi and chips and gammon with pineapple on their back page to cater for those many people who couldn't quite handle a chicken madras. Now they're so ubiquitous that it's true that chicken tikka masala is now officially Britain's national dish.
Actually, almost none of the 12,000 Indian restaurants are Indian at all. Some are Pakistani, but the vast majority are Bangladeshi, though the cuisine is mainly from the Lahori kitchen, which is in Pakistan.
Confused? You will be unless you've already visited the exhibition at the Birmingham Museum and Arts Gallery, so successful that it's been extended. It's called Knights of the Raj, which really is the full Buna, charting the rise of a multi-billion-pound success story for small businesses, which are to be found in every city, town, and even village, from Land's End to John O'Groats. It's a confection greater than even the finest masala, and its curator is Birmingham-born artist of note, whose canvas stretches from New York to the Vatican. He is Mohammed Ali MBE, and he's graced us with his presence today. It's quite a change for you. You're a street artist, very famous, cult, hip, to a curry exhibition in Birmingham. Tell us what took you into that hallowed hall.
Sure. The curry industry really was where it started for me. That was my livelihood. As the son of an immigrant from Bangladesh, really, I've been working in my dad's restaurant, my late father, since I was 11 years old. It was really that which made it possible for me to become an artist. I went on, and I didn't want to continue with the curry trade. It was something that I struggled with, and many people in my generation not wanting to kind of take on the business of our parents and that trade they were in. And I became a graffiti artist. You know, I started to travel and paint and build my profile as an artist. So really, I'm kind of doing a bit of a full circle. I kind of left the trade, wasn't really interested in it, but now I feel like I'm going back to try and, you know, let that inform the work that I'm doing. Tell stories is what I like to do. Giving voices to communities that, you know, do not have that voice. And as an artist, that's what I try to do, empower people through different and extraordinary new ways.
It's been a runaway success. It's been extended already. Everyone speaks so highly of it. Tell us the best bits.
You know, I remember standing on the steps of the grand launch when we had 2 months ago, and I said at the start that, you know, our parents, when they came to this country, they probably wouldn't have even thought themselves worthy of cleaning the steps of these museums, this historic building which we're in, and now they're being venerated on the walls of these galleries. Their voice has entered into these prestigious venues that absolutely must tell these stories, and putting it in such a venue and having such a wide audience for them to come and see this community that exists and they live alongside but are oblivious to their story. That for me is just magic, that we can take such a unique story of curry in Britain and how it transformed this country and actually putting that into a historic museum.
Well, you know, Mohammed, it really did transform. I mean, I grew up in a time where when you went out for a meal, it was for sausage, egg and chips with bread and butter and a pot of tea. To what do you attribute the almost insatiable taste for curry in Britain?
Well, I think it was just something new at that time, especially if we look at when this happened. This was not 60s and 70s. It goes way back to the 30s, 40s.
I was surprised to learn that from you,
right.
because certainly where I come from, there were none until the late 60s. And that will be true for most of the country. But it goes back further. Tell us.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the early single men, and my father came in the 50s, but before him, there were some that had taken on places, you know, the kind of greasy cafe type space, and slowly introduced a few dishes onto that. So they were either taking on these businesses or, you know, they were kind of, some of them married, some of the cases I found had married local women, and that's how they kind of, who had these cafes. And then they added these dishes, and that's where it started.
So how acceptable was it then at the time for people to eat curry?
I mean, at the time, the menu was very simple. It was chicken curry, meat curry, right? So the spices were very, and then you also couldn't get the spices like you could. So they were much blander in taste. But that's why you see things like scampi. Until this day, you still see scampi and omelettes on the menus. Yeah.
Really? I thought that had
They
gone.
still have it.
When I took my mother and father to Indian restaurants, they went to the back page and ordered the scampi or the gammon, whilst I went for the piping hot.
Even at that time, I found old menus from the 50s and 60s, and there was chow mein on the dishes. There was Chinese dishes, because some of the British at the time, they were quite accustomed to the Chinese dishes.
Yes.
And so there was this kind of slow process. It wasn't just sudden.
Yeah.
There was this, let's get some English on there, let's get some Chinese, and slowly wean the British into kind of being a bit more experimental.
Well, it's not sudden in the lifetime of a person, but it is sudden historically. Britain had more or less the same cuisine for many centuries. Of course, the richer ate better than the poor, but now, in the space of, 60 years, 70 years, all is transformed and curry is the king. Let me ask you an often asked question of me. Why do Bangladeshis cooking Pakistani-style food call themselves Indian restaurants?
It's a very complex one, right? But I think also it's because Bangladesh is relatively a new country, right? Yeah. So there was this kind of this kind of lack of confidence, really, of us asserting our Bangladeshiness, if you like. Indian, to label it Indian was quite a lazy approach to just say, the British, they know Indian. And also Indian's very, the exotic. And
quite glamorous.
Yes, exactly. Because of that, we said, stick to Indian. They won't know otherwise. right?
And do you as a Bangladeshi feel any slight niggle about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm totally frustrated about it. My parents, who are Bangladeshi immigrants, I absolutely want the people of my father's generation to be recognized, right? Why is it that they aren't? You know, when people mention Bangladesh in this day and age, Bangla what? You know, people are still a little bit, you know, they're not familiar with it. And I feel that the transformation of British cuisine by such a community, if that community doesn't get its respect that it's deserved, my late father's efforts and his struggles and all of the things he had to put up with, and I could go into all the hardships that I've seen with my own eyes, the struggles, the racism, the prejudice, the fights, the drunkards we had to deal with, the unglamorous side of the curry trade. All of that kind of goes in vain, really, of what his life was about.
It's quite a, I won't call it revenge, but Britain conquered the Indian subcontinent, plundered it for centuries, stole everything they could carry. Now, you're here, number one, and you have built a phenomenal business model. I mean, these are small family businesses for the most part. Of course, the most successful ones are a bit more corporate now, but the model has been poor people arriving from Bangladesh and becoming restaurateurs and building a business that's worth many billions, at least £5 billion per annum in the British economy. That's a success story by anybody's standards.
Absolutely. You know, people will say, and we'll hear the discourse around immigrants and sponging off the system. I tell you now, my father, I hardly saw my father because he dedicated his time day and night. And people, not just my father, of that entire generation, those immigrants worked hard to build what they have today. No one got it easy. They came, they struggled, and they went through the hardship they were visionaries. They had visions for the future of settling here, building their empires, establishing their homes and families, and educating their kids to become those leaders in the future. That's what they did. Let's not belittle them in any way. No one can, in fact. How dare anybody, in fact, belittle the efforts of a simple man selling curry? Right? I heard that growing up in school. You know, I'd hear those jokes about curry and Ali's dad owns a curry house and whatnot. You know what, I tell you something, I couldn't really, as a child wanting to just fit in, I couldn't really hold my head up high. I didn't, you know. Now it's about reclaiming that and say, yeah, and what?
And that's what the exhibition does.
Well, as George says, it has become a very successful industry in Britain, but I believe you're a bit concerned about this curry house.
What the British public are oblivious to, I found, certainly journeying through this exhibition, that the death of the curry house, the crisis, the curry crisis, is inevitable. They are closing down left, right and centre due to various factors. There's, you know, the problems of staffing and bringing new staff from abroad. Tighter regulations around that means that these places can't keep running. And people are shocked at that. Really? We didn't know that there was a curry crisis? There's many other factors of the costs of running these businesses, etc. But really, the high street curry house that we're so familiar with could be a thing of the past. I'm very concerned, and I'm hoping that this exhibition can tell the story, the backstory of how that curry ended up on every high street in Britain, right? People are oblivious to the stories of struggle and all of this that went into it. It didn't just appear. And I feel that this exhibition and the continued efforts, if we can mobilize and let those voices that are never heard be told, and that's how we can try and bridge the gap and maybe change things.
So let's tell the viewers again, because we're going to come up to Birmingham to see it. It's at the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and it's been extended, so it's running till when?
January the 14th. So
January the 14th. So a bit of time, but not unlimited time. You should move that around the country, you know.
That is the plan, and that is exactly what I'm doing right now. We're speaking in London. I'm going to New York, actually, believe it or not, as well. There's interest in knowing about the British curry story, even abroad.
Oh, so the British story in New York. That's great.
I remember searching New York up and down the mean streets, looking for an Indian restaurant 30 or 40 years ago. Mohammed Ali MBE, it's been a pleasure talking to you about Knights of the Raj. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Right, so WASPI, back to 60, 66, 60, what is this all about? Leo Sinclair says, if it's all about balancing out the difference between age, we retire, and how long we live, then surely women should be retiring later than men, not earlier.
Yes, but women have had to suffer lower pay, lower career expectations because of leaving work to have children, especially women born in the 1950s.
Well, it's actually about that. It's all about timing.
A woman's lot today is still not great, but it was a hell of a lot worse in the 1950s.
And what about the curry house? What's the origin? What's the story of that? Fra Hughes says culture and diversity are the lifeblood of every nation, and it's reflected in their cuisine. A lamb madras, you say? That will do nicely.
Better than a sausage, egg and chips, I can tell you.
Well, that's all the tweets we've got time for today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on social media on RT_Sputnik, that's Twitter and Instagram, or on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.